elders for this warm welcome, and thank you all for your warm welcome this morning. I'm very excited to be here and to be a part of this church. More than just excited, though, I'm also very humbled. This is a very important place. Important things are happening. Life change is happening and will continue to happen. And so this is a sobering reality to accept this responsibility at this church. Before we get started with the message today, I was reflecting on something that I was reading just last week. I've been reading through the book of Leviticus in my personal time with the Lord, and I don't think it's a coincidence that I came across the commissioning of the first high priest of Israel just last week. His name is Aaron. And as I'm sure the elders were involved of ancient Israel, commissioning him, there were different liturgies involved, and I'm sure they introduced him to the nation. And there was this moment in the text in Leviticus, I think it was chapter 9. Do we have that text up here? Yes, chapter 9. That caught my eye. You see the first words of Aaron as he accepts this responsibility and he takes the stage and addresses the nation for the very first time. And the first words out of his mouth, I was struck that it wasn't a carefully planned political speech. It wasn't a vision-casting moment for him. It wasn't a time for him to explain some kind of teaching that was going to define his ministry. It wasn't anything like that. The text says, then Aaron lifted up his hands towards the people, and he blessed them. The first words out of his mouth in his official capacity was a word of blessing to the people. And so I'd like, before we get into the message, I'd like for my first words to you in this capacity to be a word of blessing. Spring Branch, you have been faithful. You have showed perseverance. You have showed patience. You have showed trust. You've stuck with it. I believe that the Lord wants this church to heal. I believe that the Lord wants souls to be saved here. That the Lord wants believers to mature in discipleship here. That the Lord wants growth to happen here. And with that said, here's also the words of Aaron in one of his blessings. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And may the Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.
Well, if you have a Bible with you, go ahead and open it up and turn to, hey, Bill, enjoy me today. Go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 7. We're going to be in Matthew 7. And if you've been here throughout the summer, we've been going through the most famous sermon ever preached. It's a sermon by Jesus called the Sermon on the Mount. It's the most read, the most quoted, the most memorized sermon probably in all of history. And we're going to read just the conclusion, just Jesus' conclusion in that sermon. So Matthew chapter 7, you can turn there. If you don't have a Bible with you, that's fine. We'll put the verses up on the screen. And what you're going to see is that Jesus uses 4 different analogies, 4 different pictures to say basically the same thing over and over 4 different times. And so here we start out in chapter 7, verse number 13. Jesus says, he talks about 2 different gates. He says, enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the way is easy that leads to destruction. And those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow, and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Next, he talks about 2 different kinds of teachers. Verse 15, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? No, of course not. So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. The next illustration, he talks about 2 different places that we can go after this life on earth is finished. He says, verse 21, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. And then finally, he again is using the same illustration. He talks about 2 different foundations on which to build your life. Verse number 24, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and they beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it was founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. And great was the fall of it. As he finishes his sermon on the mount, this is what the narrator says. And when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes. As we look at Jesus' conclusion to this passage, I'm going to look at three different truths. He wants us to know three different truths from this passage. Number one, he's going to show us that there is a right way and there is a wrong way. There is a right way and a wrong way. 4 different times he illustrates that point, that there are 2 different paths you can take in your life. Number 2, we're going to see that there is an afterlife. He mentions this place called heaven, this place of eternity spent with God and with Jesus in heaven. And then he mentions another alternative. If you do not end up in this place, he mentions a place of destruction. He mentions a place of death. He mentions a place that he describes with fire. So we'll talk about that. This is a sobering message. This is a sobering way. And it's not a comedy sketch for him. This is a very sobering way for him to end his sermon. But he talks about 2 different forms of the afterlife. And then number 3, and most importantly, he says this, that you get to choose. You get to choose which path you were going to take and which afterlife you were going to be a part of. And if you're already a Christian, if you're already a follower of Jesus, and you have that stuff figured out in your eternity, here's your choice. Who are you going to tell? Somebody's got to tell everybody. Somebody's got to put this message out, this message of the gospel. So who are you going to tell? That's the choice that we're going to get. So let's jump right into the text today and first look at this point number 1. There is a right way and there is a wrong way. There's a right way and there's a wrong way. Once again, he uses 4 different illustrations. He talks about 2 different gates. There's a wide way and they're narrow. He talks about 2 different trees, a good tree and a bad tree. 2 different claims. Those who trusted in Jesus in a personal relationship in order to get to heaven, and those who are trying to earn their way to heaven by doing various good works and prophesying and doing things in Jesus' name, but don't have that relationship. And then lastly, he talks about 2 different foundations. A foundation that stands the test of time. After the storm has come and when the time is over, it stands. And another one where you've built your house here, but then at the end of time, it doesn't stand the test of time. So there are 2 different ways. This reminds me of something that my wife and I were doing just a few months ago. We were fixing up our house, getting ready to sell it up in Pennsylvania. A lot of work to be done. We were doing a lot of work in the basement. Now up north, a lot of houses have, it's just like an entire floor underground under the house. I know you don't have that up here. It's pretty amazing. There's all kinds of space, and now we move, and what are we going to do with all this stuff that we used to have in our extra bonus room downstairs? And so, what's that now? I'll put in the shed. Okay, we need to get a shed. And Jesus talked about that. He said, yeah, build bigger barns. He said something like that. So we had this basement downstairs, and that was probably the worst part of the house. I mean, very few people went in the basement. So we had to do some fixing up before we sold the house. I painted, redid some light fixtures, and took out the outlets and replaced all the outlets. And replacing all the outlets, it was pretty easy work. Once you get in a rhythm, you can kind of knock one out in just a few minutes, flip the breaker, pull the thing out, rewire it, push it back in, make sure it works and all that. So everything was going fine. I was moving pretty quickly until I got to the light switches on the other side of the room. There were 3 light switches all next to each other. So you pull that thing out, you unscrew everything, and now it's not just 2 wires, it's 10 or something. There were wires all over the place. And then furthermore, one of them was a 3-way switcher. I didn't know what these things were, but there were 2 different switches that controlled the same light. And I kid you not, I spent hours. I spent more time on this one little section than all the other light fixtures and switches and outlets in the entire basement because I kept doing it the wrong way. Some of you have done electrical work like this, and you go to the breaker, you switch the thing off, you pull the things out, you rewire the things, you push it back in, hit the breaker. I wore a path out between the light switch and the breaker. I was on YouTube so long, I think YouTube's like, dude, don't you have this figured out by now? How many videos can you watch explaining the same thing? But I could not figure this out. It drove me nuts. And then finally I got it to work. I learned a very valuable lesson that day. And here's the lesson. When it comes to these different switches, there's one way for it to go. And there are numerous wrong ways that don't work. And I tested out every single wrong way, I guess just to make sure. But then there's one right way and many wrong ways. And so Jesus here, he talks about 2 different ways, that there's a right way and a wrong way. In reality, what he is saying is that there's one right way, and there are a plethora, numerous, countless different wrong ways to live your life. Now, let me just spell out something that's a bit obvious, especially if you're not a Christian. This is an offensive part of the Christian religion. This can be offensive if you are not a Christian. That Jesus claims that he is the only way to have a genuine relationship with God. That he is the only way to spend eternity with God. That he is the only truth. This is one of the most common objections, one of the most common criticisms of Christianity, that you claim you are the only way. And what makes it worse is that Jesus doesn't just say, I'm the only way. He has the audacity to say that every other faith path, Allah, the Brahmin, every other faith leader or faith path you can choose, he has the audacity to say that those are all the wrong way and lead to, the word he uses, I think, here is destruction. This is an offensive thing to say. And I wish that I could stand before you. I wish I could read this and say, if you read between the lines and look up the Greek and stuff, here's what he's actually saying, that there's actually many right paths and that he's one of the ways. I wish that I could say that. I wish that I could agree with the idea that, there's numerous truths out there, there's numerous religions, and if you pick the one that is, it seems good, that we're all going to kind of end up, all the paths crisscross, and we're all going to end up in the same place. I genuinely wish that I could say that. But that's not what Jesus says. And here's the major problem with that. I wish that I could agree with that, but here's the major problem with that. None of us accept that there are multiple truths in any other major area of our life, do we? How many of you have two doctors? One doctor who says, you better shake things up, or in a couple of years you're going to be toast. And then you go to another doctor who's like, hey man, welcome back. I got some donuts. How many of you have two doctors? How many of you have two accountants? One that says, oh man, the IRS are going to be breathing down your neck on this one. The other one's like, oh, buy the boat, just write it off as a business expense. How many of you have two personal trainers? You go to one, it's like, one more rep, let's add some weight. The other one's like, man, they just dropped a new season of Severance. Let's get out of here and get a pizza. No, we don't accept this. We don't have two dentists that tell us different things. We do not accept that there are multiple truths. In real life, we want to know, even if we don't like the truth. Even if our doctor tells us stuff that makes us cry, we're going to go to him. We're going to go to her because we want the truth in every other area of our life. And Jesus is just telling the truth here. Logically speaking, Christianity cannot be right, and other religions can also be right. I'm just saying, logically, this is not possible. It is logically possible that Christianity is not right and there's another way. But I'm not saying I agree with that. But it is not logically possible that there are numerous true religions. This is not compatible. And every major religion is exclusive. I've had conversations with many people who do believe that there are different paths, that there are different truths out there. However, I haven't met anyone who says that, who has read the whole Bible, who has read the Quran, who has actually studied out these different religions, because every religion is exclusive, and Jesus is making an exclusive claim. But here's the beautiful thing about Christianity. I want to show you a quote from Tim Keller. He says this: all religions are exclusive, but Christianity is the most inclusive exclusivity that there is. In other words, this is also the most inclusive religion. It doesn't matter where you're from, your nationality. You can be American, you can be Russian, you can be Antarctican. I don't know if that's a thing. Whatever your color is, your skin color, your background, whatever you've done in your life, whatever wrongs you have committed, it is the most inclusive religion, because anybody can accept Jesus. And by the way, if you're here today, if you're watching online, I need to learn where the camera is. Where is the camera? I'm just going to point at that one. If you're watching online, and maybe you're exploring Christianity, you would say, I'm not sure I would identify as a Christian. I'm open to it. I'm Christian curious. I'm exploring. If that's the case, I want to introduce you to a book. This is called A Doubter's Guide to World Religions by John Dixon. He gives, I think, the most fair account of the 5 major religions in the world. Okay? So if you're exploring Christianity, he gives a fair account of. He doesn't pick on Hinduism or Judaism or anything. He gives a very fair, honest account. He's interviewed people, read the different books on that. He's read these sacred texts from these other religions. And so if you're in here today, if you're exploring Christianity, you're not sure what you believe. I have, this is an extra copy. I have another extra copy or two in my office. I'd be happy to give this to you. Now, if you're a full-fledged Christian and this is interesting, you can buy your own. Okay, it's on Amazon. I can't just pass out books willy-nilly. But if you're not a Christian, man, I'll buy all kinds of books, and we'll talk. Just hit me up and we'll talk about it. Okay, you don't have to agree with me, but I would love to talk to you about that. So I'll give that to you if you're interested. So there's a right way and a wrong way, Jesus says. Number 2, there is an afterlife. There is an afterlife. And he also says that the right way leads to a place that he calls heaven, and the wrong way leads to a place that he describes with, he doesn't say the word hell, but he uses words that describe fire and destruction and eternal death. And this is trouble. This is trouble. This is unpleasant. Here's some of the things he says, verse 13 and 14. The way is easy that leads to destruction. The way is hard that leads to life. Verse 19. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. This image of fire comes up a lot throughout the New Testament. Verse number 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. He mentions these two different places. Now, the doctrines of heaven and hell can be complex, and I don't have time to go over all. I just want to show you a QR code. There's an article I wrote a couple years ago, just a crash course of heaven and hell. We don't have time to go through the intricacies of it, because there's hell, and then there's the lake of fire, and Gehenna, and there's different terms. The same goes for heaven. So if you want to check out that article, you can do that. You might find that interesting. If you don't find that interesting, I think you'll find this interesting. There's a study that was just done this year, and it showed that the overwhelming majority of Americans believe in an afterlife. This was done by Pew Research. I have a screenshot of the study that was done. The overwhelming majority, 70% of Americans, that's greater than the worldwide average, by the way, believe in an afterlife. You know, I grew up, back when I was a teenager, back when I was a young adult, I was reading all these, I was hearing about, I guess I wasn't like researching things as a 21-year-old, but I was hearing these ideas that sociologists were saying, you know, religion is kind of dying out. This stuff is dying out. We're having advancements in science, we're having advances in technology and vaccines and medicine and stuff. Before long, religion's going to be a thing of the past. And that just didn't happen. Okay, the world is just as spiritual as it's ever been. Spirituality is going nowhere, even though there's all these advances in science and technology. 70% of Americans believe in an afterlife. But here's the interesting thing. Far less believe in a negative afterlife. And then this is not just America, this goes worldwide. And even as far back, I looked at Gallup polls, as far back as they started tracking this stuff. And in America, as far back as I can go, every single year that they track this, people have always believed in heaven more than in hell. I just find that interesting. Why do you think that is? What do you think that is? I think it's because we don't want to believe in a place of destruction, a place of punishment. I don't want to believe in that. I so desperately, if God gave me a Sharpie and say, hey, redact, pick like 9 verses to redact, well, this would be one. I would pick a few, and I would scratch. I do not want to believe that there's a place of torment. I don't even for the worst human beings, the Hitlers of the world, I can't even wrap my head around being okay with that. I am not okay with this, and you are not. This is an unpleasant idea. This is a part of my faith that I am not happy about. I do not want to believe that there is some terrible fire-described afterlife. I do not want to believe that. And I'll even say it this strongly here. I brought a picture along with me of a fireplace. This is not my fireplace, but about 3 weeks ago, I was sitting next to a fire with one of my good friends up in Pennsylvania. It was our final time. I would have taken a picture of my fireplace, but ironically, I gifted it to him because it was messy. I didn't want to put it in the truck. And so we were sitting in our backyard. It was kind of our last time getting together before we had to move. Okay, it was the week before we had to move. And so we're sitting by the fireplace. We're having snacks and just chatting for a couple hours. And he pops up with this question. He says, hey, Nick, I got a question for you. He's not a Christian. He said, don't you ever feel like it's manipulative? Telling people that there's a hell, and if they don't agree with you, if they don't believe like you, if they don't follow the things and read the book that you read and all that kind of stuff, that they're going to go there. Don't you think that's kind of manipulative? It was a great question. It was a great question, an honest question. So we talked about that for a few minutes. And here's what happened. After a few minutes of us talking about that, both of us were just kind of looking at the fire. You know, you do that. It's night. You fixate on the fire. And I was watching the flames. I could smell the smoke. I could feel that, we're several feet away, and I could feel the heat. And I told him, I said, man, I got to be honest with you. The Bible I believe and the Jesus that I worship, like he says that, I had a hard time getting it out. This is what he says, that your eternity will be in this place. And I said, man, I like you. You're a good guy. We're friends. I don't like this. This is a part of my faith that I do not like. And we just kind of sat there with that for a couple of seconds in silence. And then he broke the silence by laughing because he said, man, I don't believe this stuff. So you're good. I mean, so he broke the silence a little bit. But we've had numerous conversations about faith over the years because he believes differently than I do. And this is not a pleasant part. But Jesus, even though the truth is not pleasant, he spells it right out at the end of this sermon. So what do we do with this unpleasant information? What do we do with this information that we do not want to accept? Well, number 3, you get to choose. There is a right way and there's a wrong way. There is an afterlife. And Jesus says, here's the great thing. It's all inclusive. You get to choose. You get to choose if you're going to go down this path and accept Jesus and reorient your life all around Jesus and be all about Jesus and this is your faith. You get to choose that, or you get to choose if you're going to reject Jesus and not follow him and end up in this other afterlife that none of us want to think about. And listen, I wish that I could tell you there was a middle ground. I wish so badly that I could say, you know what, just keep yourself open. Just make sure you're still spiritual. Don't worry about being religious or committing anywhere. And all the paths come together. But that's not how it works. And we understand this in real life, right? I took a picture that none of you are going to want to see. Here's a picture I took on Google. Anybody know where this is? Can you read the sign? Yeah, it's the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, and many of us have spent many a lonely moment on that bridge tunnel. And there's different bridge tunnels. I'm learning about how much we hate these tunnels. Because people, have you been on the such and such tunnel yet? No, but I hear it's terrible. So there's this tunnel, and if you look at the map, and my wife or our family, we've been on this tunnel, of course. There's as you approach it, there's the default position, the wide road. The default position is going into this tunnel that nobody likes. And as you're traveling along, there's off-ramps. There's these times where you can curve off the road and take an alternate position, and you have time. You know what? You have time. You have time as you get closer. But there comes a moment, and this is kind of the moment. This is right past the last off-ramp. There's no off-ramp. There comes a time where you can be curious, but then this is the path you're taking. And so if you're exploring faith, if you're a Christian who has an unchristian friend who's exploring faith, this is wonderful you're exploring, but there will come a time where exploration will be over. And so this is what Jesus wants you to do. He wants you to choose life. He wants you to choose the right path. He wants you to choose to follow him. Here's what he says in verse number 24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine, all of you are hearing these words of his, and puts them into practice, it's like a wise man who built his house on a rock. And then he says, verse 26, but everyone who hears these words and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came, and the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great clash. So that's if you're exploring. Now, what did the rest of us do? Those of us who are saying, you know what, I'm all in with Jesus. I've made this decision. I appreciate the message, Pastor Nick. I appreciate all the analogies, but I've already made this decision. I'm all in with Jesus. Some of you are like, look, I've branded my body with tattoos that prove I'm part of Jesus. Like I'm quite open about the fact that I'm all in with Jesus. Well, what do I do with this passage? Here's the choice you get to make. Who are you going to tell? Sorry, Jess. I just happen to look right at you. I can barely see anybody, by the way, so it's not personal. You got the wide vibe going on. So some of you are like, look, I'm all in. I'm all in with Jesus. So what do we do? And that's me. What do we do? Thanks. Somebody just turned the lights up a little bit so I can see better. you got me, man. So what do we do with this information? I'm all in with Jesus. What choice do I have to make? Here's the choice. Who are you going to tell? Because Jesus, he has two audiences he's speaking to. He's speaking to some people who are skeptical and trying to figure it out and deciding what they want to do with their religion. But there's the disciples who are listening, and their application is this. What do you think Jesus is doing? He's sharing the gospel. And if we're following him, you got to follow what he does. I mean, we're to share the gospel. We got to share our faith. Now listen, most of us know, most Christians do not share their faith on a regular basis because we don't want to be rude and we don't want to be weird. Right? I don't want to be rude. I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to be opinionated. I don't want to be weird. I don't want people to think I'm fanatical. I'm a fundamentalist. And I grew up I grew up practicing all kinds of forms of evangelism. I used to knock on doors a lot. I would hand out tracts. I'd go to Walmart and just hand out tracts to people. I tried street preaching one time. And some of these things, there was evangelism explosion that was awesome in a former era. So there's different forms of evangelism that have been practiced. And today, in today's society, that's not as effective. And so what do we do? We're going to talk a lot about faith sharing in the coming years. But how do we share our faith in today's society? I'm going to give you a key. I'm going to give you one word that's going to make this much easier. Here's one word, the key to sharing your faith in today's current society, especially with young adults. Here's the word. You ready? Did somebody say text? Not the word. Authenticity. Let's be authentic. Hey, listen, the highest value in today's culture is authenticity. to be your true self, to find your true self, and to express your true self. And there's nothing more frowned upon in today's society than silencing someone who is trying to express the true self that they have found, than silencing or dismissing or reprimand someone who's just trying to express what they really believe and who they really are as a person. Nothing is more frowned upon, and nothing is more celebrated and accepted than just being authentic. So I would argue for you not to share your faith that's inauthentic. That would be hypocritical. And so just be authentic. If who you are as a definition of who you are as a Christ follower, and you share that, you're being authentic. That's all you're doing, and everybody else you're around is being authentic as well. I'm gonna give you a quick example of how to do this. So you're gonna go back to work on. Some of you have to work tomorrow, I'm sure, but you're gonna go back to work on Tuesday, right? Somebody's probably gonna ask, "Hey, how was your Labor Day? What'd you do this weekend?" Here's a quick line. I mean, it's this easy. Here's a quick line you can use. Yeah, our Labor Day was awesome. We grilled out, we went to the beach, got on the boat, whatever you want to say. And, church was interesting. We have a new pastor. And his message was controversial. This is controversial. Just let that hang. And I guarantee you somebody's going to be like, controversial? Well, spill the tea. What did this guy say? And then you just say, well, it was his first sermon. I didn't pick the text, by the way. I'm just finishing y'all's thing. So, y'all's series that you're in. So I didn't choose this necessarily. I would have chosen something a little nicer. But here's what. Just say, we've talked about like heaven and hell, and there's only one way. And hey, what do you think about that? And just have that dialogue. You don't have to convert them right away. Just have that dialogue. Spiritual conversations and authenticity. This is the key to sharing your faith in today's society. And I've talked to many non-Christians who have told me, they're okay if you talk about your faith. We're open. We're a spiritual bunch, us Americans. We really are. So be authentic. Lastly, one more thing I want to say about this. I want to make a promise. To all of you. If you ever bring with you someone who's not a Christian to church, if you bring a family member, a peer, a coworker, if you ever bring someone to church with you, I will make two promises to you. Number one, I will not poke fun of them. I don't care what their faith is. I don't care if they don't have a faith. I'm not going to poke fun of them. Make fun of, can you believe atheists? I'm not going to do that. I have friends that are atheists, they're smart people. I'm not going to make fun of anybody, okay? I'm going to respect what they believe. So number two, second promise, I will not embarrass you. Y'all know what I'm talking. If you've ever brought somebody to church, you know exactly what I'm saying. Man, you paid attention to that message more than you ever listen. Like every single song, if you bring someone to church, you can feel embarrassed. Is this person going to embarrass me? I will not poke fun of them. I will not embarrass you. So bring your friends. Bring your coworkers, bring your peers, and this will be a place where truth will be stated, but we'll also be honest. Finally, let me just recap what we've done today. If you're on the worship team, you can join me on stage. Here's what we looked at today. Jesus, he teaches 4 different analogies, but he's really getting at 3 different truths. Number 1, there is a right way and there is a wrong way. Number 2, he says there is an afterlife. There's an afterlife. If you trust in Jesus, you will spend eternity with God in a place that he calls twice in this text heaven. If you choose not to, if you choose to reject Jesus or do not settle on that, there is another afterlife. It's a place that he describes as death, as destruction, as a place of fire, unfortunately. And the good thing is you get to choose. If you've already made that decision, here's the choice you get to make. Who are you going to tell? You're going to tell somebody. You're going to tell somebody. Let me pray for you before we finish today. Father, we studied your son's famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, and we learned some very hard truths today. But the truth is our friend. The truth is for us, and we need to discover that truth. Life isn't just fun and games, and you have created us for a purpose. You have created us to spend eternity with you. We are eternal beings. Father, I want to pray for anyone who is watching online or happens to be present today who is not a Christian. Would you give them the curiosity that they need to continue exploring your son, Jesus? I also want to pray for all of my Christian friends out here that you would just give us an urgency, a confidence to share our faith and just be authentic about who we really are, no matter who we're talking to. I pray this to you, Father, in the name of your Son, Jesus, by the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you so much. Would you please stand and worship with the worship team, and I'll come back up to close this out.